Alrighty, welcome to Unit 2.8, Compound Inequalities. Compound means to take two things and put them together, right? So we're going to take two inequalities, and they're either going to be and or, and they look different when you graph them, right? So compound inequalities are two inequalities or more, right? But at least two, has to have at least two inequalities joined together with and or with and or. So, or inequalities have a tendency to graph apart. They have a tendency to go in opposite directions. Not always, but most of the time, right? Type 1 are or. So, x is less than or equal to -2 or x is greater than 3. So, we graph them. Closed circle, open circle, left or right. We know how to do all this, right? So, if it's less than or equal to nope, that's not right. If it's less than or equal to -2, then it's going to be a closed circle and it's going to go left. If it's x is greater than or equal to 3, it's going to be an open circle and it's going to go right. So x is either from this side of the number line or from this side of the number line, but it cannot be for the numbers in between. Right? And how do we write this in interval notation? All right, it could be -2 and bracket, because it could include -2, all the way to -infinity. That is terrible infinity. Yeah, that's not much better. Right? Or it can be from 3, and it's parentheses because it doesn't include 3. Closed circle is a bracket, open circle is a parenthesis, to infinity. That's better. Right? So x could either be in this group or this group. This group or this group. Make sense? Alright, so first you have to solve the or inequality and then you have to graph it. Alright, so let's make it a little bigger so we can see it. X minus 4 is less than -7. First you have to isolate the x. Add 4 to both sides. So x is less than -3. So you can go ahead and graph that. It's open circle less than, or divide by 2 to isolate the x. It's greater than or equal to 6. So 6, closed circle to the right. That's it. It's basically two inequalities on one graph. Because x could be somewhere in here or somewhere in here. But it can't be in between. Alright, let's do another one. Isolate the x. Remember, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you're going to flip the inequality symbol. This is a +5, so we're going to subtract 5. Remember, if there isn't a sign in front of a number, you can assume it's positive. If there isn't a sign in front of a variable, you can assume it's positive. So x is less than 1. Now let's graph those two things. Greater than or equal to 3. less than 1. So the only numbers it can't be is 2 and 1. All the other numbers are possible. And how would you graph this? All right, this one, because it's a bracket, it could be 3 because it's a closed circle all the way to infinity, or open circle, so negative infinity to 1, open circle, parentheses. So there's 3 pieces. Solve the inequalities, graph the inequalities, write it in interval notation. Solve the inequalities. Oh, I put equals. It's not equals. It's greater than. Solve the inequalities. Uh-oh. It's going to be 0. X is less than 0. Then graph the inequalities. X is greater than 4, but less than 0. Alright, so we're going to put the or in the middle. They're both open circles, so it's all going to be parentheses. It's going to go to infinity in this direction, and negative infinity in this direction. 0 here, 4 here. Solve the inequality. Interesting. Graph the inequalities. X is greater than or equal to 2, closed circle to the right. X is less than or equal to negative 2, closed circle to the left. So we know it's going to have 2 brackets somewhere. It's going to have the brackets covering the 2 and the negative 2, right? So we have our or. We have to negative infinity to negative 2 bracket, or 2 with a bracket to positive infinity. The only thing it can't be is 1, 0, and negative 1. It doesn't matter how complicated they make the problem, you just keep going. This one, because it has parentheses, you're going to distribute first. Don't lose the negative sign. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Once the parentheses are gone, solve. Oh, I lost my x. Where's my x? Should be negative 6x. I lost my x. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Don't lose your x. Add 3 to both sides. Negative 6x is less than negative 12. Because I'm dividing by a negative, if you multiply or divide by a negative, you flip the inequality symbol. We're going to subtract 1 from both sides. Negative x. Remember, I said if there's a negative in front of the x, that x is not isolated. You have to isolate that x. So there's an invisible 1 there. So to get rid of that negative, divide both sides by -1. Because we're dividing by a negative, we're going to flip the inequality symbol. Step 2, graph them. X is greater than 2. X is less than or equal to -4. And then create your interval notation. It's going to go -4 bracket infinity, right? Negative infinity. Or parentheses 2 to infinity. And negative infinity and infinity always get parentheses because they go on forever for infinity. Right? Those are your or